This is the PortKeys LH5H. It's a high brightness 5.2-inch on-camera monitor. I'm going to compare it to some other PortKeys monitors and also the Atomos Ninja V. Let's get into it. So you can see here I have all four monitors set up outside so you can compare the brightness. So what I did was reset all of them to factory default and then set them to their brightest settings. The Atomos is by default at its brightest, but the other monitors I found they were at like a middle setting or a lower setting, so I had to turn them up to their highest brightness. And it's curious because these are all different brightnesses. So the Atomos Ninja V is 1000 nits, the PortKeys LH5 is 1500 nits, the LH5H is 1700 nits, and the BM5 Mark II is 2200 nits. But looking at them, the three PortKeys monitors are definitely brighter than the Atomos, but the three PortKeys kind of look about the same in brightness. In fact, the original LH5 appears to be a little brighter, but really it just looks like it's blowing out some of the bright parts of the image. It's not necessarily brighter, it's just kind of washing stuff out. So it's interesting that even though their numbers are 500 to 700 nits different, they appear to be about the same brightness. So take that for whatever it's worth. I've brought you in a little closer so we can see the details. This has a tempered glass screen. It sits flush to the unit, unlike some of their previous offerings like this one where you had to attach the glass screen with these screws in the corner, although I've heard they've upgraded this so that the screen is now built in. And also the LH5, the original, had kind of a recessed screen like this. Otherwise, it does share very much the design and shape of the LH5. We can see here that they are the same size. They have a similar plastic bezel here. The F keys are very similar. The menu system is different. It has kind of this weird menu arrow setup here, which is confusing when you go to use it because you're not sure which key is the menu button and which one is the arrow key. I kind of prefer the scroll wheel that they had on this one. And on the back, it has a built-in NP battery mount, NPF, whereas the LH5 had an interchangeable mount that I never interchanged. I always just kept this one here. So they sit a little bit differently this way. Neither of these have a mounting point on the top. They have a single quarter 20 on the bottom, although this one does add these little nubs, which some devices have little pins that help keep this from spinning, although this whole mount here is plastic. Of course, the threads are metal, and there are some screws here that are metal. On the left side, we have the HDMI input and output and a headphone jack. On the right side, there's nothing but a vent slot right here. On the bottom, we have a 5-pin connector, which is used with their focus control cable. And this also says here camera control. So I imagine you can plug in certain cameras into this one here. Most of the cameras will plug in using this USB mini connector on the bottom. And this USB connector over here is for firmware updates with the included thumb drive. Compared to the BM5, the one thing this has over the BM5 is it accepts 4K signals. This only goes up to 1080 period. It won't do a thing with 4K. If you give it a 4K signal, it won't show you anything. It'll just be a black screen. Otherwise, the build quality in this is completely different. This has a die-cast aluminum body. It's very solid. It feels good, but it weighs a lot more. That's one great thing about these plastic bodies is they're super lightweight and they don't feel too cheap, like it's gonna just snap on you. Although if you hit this on the ground, you might run a risk of breaking this, or at least breaking the screen. This might stand a better chance, although the screen probably would crack before the body would break. But also, the BM5 doesn't have an HDMI output, it just has an input. And I found that to be kind of a big limitation. It does have SDI in and out though, but that's, if your camera doesn't have it, this won't help you. It is nice to have both options though, HDMI in and SDI in, whereas these are just HDMI. Now compared to the Ninja also has a metal body, and it has RE locating pins on the top and bottom, which I really like. I think this is the best solution for mounting your monitor on a camera. And of course, this has a slot for the hard drive, which, this doesn't have any of that kind of recording feature. The Ninja has a constant fan, which is loud enough to be heard with a microphone, especially an onboard camera microphone. So that's a bit of an issue, whereas the fan on this, you can turn it down to low, and it's quiet enough you're not going to hear it. It's very low. The LH5H comes with this compact carrying case. It's very thin plastic with some foam in it, and it's not much bigger than the monitor itself, so when you close it up, you get protection without taking up a lot of space. So that's pretty nice. I've lined up my PortKeys monitors here just to show kind of the evolution of their technology. This is probably the oldest one here, And if you wanted to have camera control with this, you needed this thing called the long arm controller. It's this metal box with some cables coming out of it. It's pretty gacky, like all kinds of cabling and stuff. It plugged into both of the HDMI ports on the side here, and that's what you had to have cable to have camera control. Now they improved on that with the BM5 and the BM5 Mark II. It had a built-in USB port that you would connect cable, sorry, over here, to your camera, so you didn't have to have that long arm controller unit, this gacky thing. Now the LH5 couldn't control cameras like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Cameras that use Bluetooth. The BM5 could, but you had to have an additional accessory, this BT1 Bluetooth module, which would attach to the back of this unit here, and it made it a little bit bulkier, and this was an extra cost. I believe this is like $120. So they've improved this yet again with the LH5H. So now you have the same kind of camera controls built in here, but you also have Bluetooth built into this unit. So you don't have to have an external module. You can control Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Cameras with this thing without any other parts or pieces. Even the antenna is built in. Now, I don't have a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera anymore, so I can't test that, but I have seen online that with some firmware updates, either from Blackmagic or from PortKeys, that functionality broke. Now, PortKeys has been hard at work trying to fix that, but I'm not sure if it's completely working at this time. One thing I want to point out is, while it's nice to have the NPF slot built into the back of the monitor here, I found this one to be rather hard to attach and detach the battery. So here's a common NPF battery, and you'd mount it in here. And that actually wasn't too bad going on. There wasn't a satisfying click because this button down here just doesn't do that. And to get it off, I'd push this button. It's pretty hard. If this was mounted on a camera, it'd be a little difficult and you'd be pushing and pulling a lot. Whereas with this one, it's a little easier. This is the LH5. It's a little easier to get it on and off, but it could also pop off just by hitting the unit. If you were to hit this, this would pop off. So that wasn't great. Now, the BM5 Mark II, it's all metal, which is really great, but the switch here, you'd have to pull it back with your finger to get this in, which is okay, and then out. So it slides on and off okay, but when you have the Bluetooth module attached, it's hard to get your finger in there. You'd have to do this kind of a thing where you're reaching around and get that slot. So I don't know, I think they just need to work on it a little bit more. For comparison, here's the Ninja, and it just seems to work better. Put the battery on here. Got a nice satisfying click. There's a big obvious button here. If you push it, it pops off. It's just easier to use, and I'm not sure. There's just subtle differences in the design, and I think PortKeys hasn't quite got the design perfect yet. Hopefully they'll figure that out. Let's get the battery on here and turn on the monitor. There's an on-off switch right here on the top. I do like having a physical switch as opposed to a push button like on the Ninja, because if you have a battery system like a V-mount and you pull the battery and replace it, this won't come on by itself, whereas this will. You have to push this one. Plus, to turn this off, you have to hold this for 5 or 6 seconds, and it just feels like an eternity trying to turn this thing off. So I much prefer having a physical sliding switch like this. Here we can see the splash screen for the new firmware, and it's different than what I have on my BM5 too, so I'm going to make a comparison with this one. In a lot of ways, I prefer what this one has, the firmware. It has kind of the traditional push the button and scroll through the menu options like you'd see on a lot of common devices. And this is actually, for me, preferred over this, which has a touchscreen menu. Now, a lot of people like touchscreens. I'd be okay with it if it was more obvious how to use it. My problem is I forget what I have to touch. I know if you swipe left or right, you get different features. See, like that. And if you swipe up, that's a different feature. Down is a different feature. And now I can't remember. There, I gotta get back to this. So, I mean, it's not bad. It's just, I'd rather have a straightforward menu system that you just push buttons. So even this, I can't scroll through very well with these buttons up here. So that's just a personal preference. I'm only going to show off certain things in the menus. There's some other good reviews out there on YouTube that cover the menu system pretty well, so I'll let them do that. I am going to update the firmware though, because there's an update for this thing that fixes a few bugs that I ran into. So let's see if we can find that together. Up, down, let's get out of this. Down, up, left. Okay, here we go. All right, so let me plug in this USB over here. So here, thick side, go, update. Are you sure? Yes. The bug I ran into is the function keys would reset every time you power cycled the unit, so that was no good. Again, I'm a big fan of physical controls, so there's 4 function keys up here. Rather than using the on-screen icons, I much prefer to use these push buttons because they always work when you push them. The on-screen doesn't always work, plus they chew up some real estate on the screen. It shrinks your image down. I'll let this run and we'll come back. All right, and we're back up. Fan. High is fairly loud. Yeah, you'd still hear middle. On low, you can't hear it. This is a really cool feature. If you flip it, automatically changes orientation. I really like that. All right, and then this is the other thing I want to play with. So this is focus, zoom, iris. This is camera control. So I've showed this in other videos. You select your camera, and then the screen changes to give you the controls based on whatever camera you have selected. And you can see here, Blackmagic, that's Bluetooth. This is the original Blackmagic. Canon, Canon Land C. We have a bunch of different Sony versions. We have the Panasonic, and there's a different Panasonic version there. So I'm obviously going to use the Zcam E2 because that's what I'm shooting with. And then you get the standard controls here. And the other thing I want to play with is this screen right here. So if you swipe up, so you tap, if you're somewhere else, you just swipe up. This is the motor control. I've shown this before with the BM5 Mark II. I will show it again with this screen here because I think this is one of the more useful features of the monitor is to be able to control a motor, and you can set A and B points, which is pretty cool. So you can just tap a button and it'll jump between the two. Well, let me just show you. I'll just plug it in. I have my motor cable plugged into my Nucleus Nano up here, and I'm just going to plug it into the bottom of the monitor like that, and we can see my Nano comes up. And if I swipe down on the menu page here, swipe up, I get the motor control page. First thing I'm going to do is hit the calibration button, and it's going to send the motor into calibration. We can see it'll find the hard stops. All right, and once that's finished, right away I can zoom using this sliding scale here. And let me get this focus over here. I had to get my focus chart out there so we can focus on something. So I'm going to set some A and B points just to show how we can transition between 2 points. So with my peaking on, I can see that that looks pretty good for that point. So that's my A point for my focus chart. And I'm going to go back to the background like that. That's my B point. And now if I hit this button right here, it transitions between those 2 points. And if that's too fast, I can just slow it down by adding more time here. Now it's a 5-second transition. So that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty nice. And if you want to just turn that off, you can hit your A and B points, and now it's back to normal focus control. Let me turn off my peaking. There we go. Now this is pretty smooth unless you see how it jumps like that. Sometimes it loses communication, I think, or maybe it's not sure where you're touching on the screen and it'll jump and it throws the motor. But otherwise it is pretty cool to be able to focus like this. Well, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe button because I'll have more equipment reviews like this coming out really soon. I've got the Axoon Cine i2 Pro to review. This is a wireless HDMI system. And I also have a couple of global shutter cameras I'll be getting in the next month or two here. So that'll be really interesting to compare. So I'll see you guys later.